Hello, I'm Katie St. Ors, certified financial planner, tax strategist, and producer of The Deep Dive. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 61, and today we will do a deep dive into Jeff Bezos and Amazon. Okay, it looks like Elizabeth and Michael are settled behind the microphones, so let's get going.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really fascinating subject, Jeff Bezos, his journey, his impact.
Right.
Track his path from his early life, founding Amazon, how it grew, his leadership style.
And the later stuff. Blue Origin, the Washington Post.
Exactly. It's a lot, I know, but we're aiming to give you that essential understanding of, well, this incredibly influential figure.
So, yeah, where do we kick off?
A natural place seems to be his formative years, right?
Yeah, definitely. Understanding those early influences, it gives you crucial context, I think. Context for the kind of drive he showed later.
Absolutely. Born 1964, Jeffrey Preston Jorgensen, later adopted by Miguel Bezos. That's an important detail.
It is.
And even before that, there's that amazing anecdote, isn't there, about him dismantling his own crib as a toddler.
Yeah, it really suggests something, doesn't it? That kind of fundamental curiosity, a need to see how things work.
Like taking things apart from the very beginning.
It points to this early inclination to explore, to understand systems.
Yeah.
Take it apart, maybe figure out how to rebuild it or innovate.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of foreshadows his later approach, doesn't it? Taking apart existing industries like retail and rebuilding them completely differently.
And you contrast that with his summers on his grandfather's ranch in Texas.
Right. Totally different. Hands-on stuff, practical mechanics, windmills, work in the land. It's an interesting mix, that intellectual curiosity and the practical problem solving.
So it wasn't just theory, and then the teenage job at McDonald's seems pretty standard.
But the sources suggest it taught him about efficiency
Right.
and customer interaction, maybe the first glimmers of that customer obsession Amazon's so famous for.
The seeds were planted early, though.
Precisely.
Trade in your boring job for a brilliant career using Adobe Creative Cloud. Start learning now with the free trial link in the description.
Those lessons, operational efficiency, customer needs, plus the curiosity and practical skills, it all kind of came together.
Then comes the academic success, valedictorian, National Merit Scholar.
And that high school graduation speech about colonizing space.
Which is just wild when you think about Blue Origin later.
Exactly. It wasn't just teenage dreaming. It's a direct line. That early vision shows that long-term thinking was there from the start.
It really is remarkable. Then Princeton, electrical engineering and computer science, building that technical foundation.
A really solid skill set. And after that strong academic start, he heads to Wall Street.
Yeah, that finance detour leading to D.E. Shaw & Co.
And D.E. Shaw, that's interesting because it was intensely data-driven, right?
Yeah.
Quantitative analysis was everything there.
And Bezos thrived.
Apparently so. Really good at using data to make decisions.
And that's where the internet epiphany happens. He's tasked with looking into investment opportunities.
Right. In this, brand new thing called the internet, it wasn't just finance anymore. It was figuring out the potential of this exploding technology.
He's analyzing the growth.
And boom, there's that statistic. 2,300% annual growth in web usage in 1994.
Wow.
I mean, that's not just growth, that's explosive.
Yeah.
A fundamental shift happening.
You just can't imagine that kind of number today. And it was that number, plus his regret minimization framework, that pushed him to leave a secure, high-paying job. Can you unpack that framework a bit?
Yeah, it's a really powerful idea for big life decisions. Basically, you imagine yourself much older, looking back.
Okay.
What would you regret more? Trying this ambitious thing and maybe failing, or never trying it at all.
Ah, I see.
And for Bezos, the thought of missing the whole internet ways, that potential regret, was way bigger than the risk of a startup failing.
So it underlines that willingness to take big risks for a long-term vision.
Definitely. And you see that framework play out later with Amazon constantly prioritizing growth over short-term profits. Huge risks involved there, too.
So fueled by this framework, he makes the cross-country drive to Seattle. Amazon begins.
Initially, Cadabra, yeah. Thankfully changed the name, inspired by the river.
Right. And the garage headquarters in Bellevue. Classic startup story.
But it was real. And focusing on books first, that wasn't random, was it?
No. Sounds very calculated.
Absolutely. Books offered this massive catalog, the long tail idea, way more than a physical store could ever stock.
Mm.
And the lower prices made it easier for people to try buying online back then.
Right.
But, and this is crucial, the sources really stress this.
What's that?
The big dream was always the everything store. Books were just the starting point, the strategic wedge to get in.
Makes sense. And the initial money came from his parents. A big chunk of their savings.
Yeah, which must have been immense pressure.
You'd think. But he was apparently very upfront about the high chance of failure.
Which is interesting, right? Given Amazon's later reputation for secrecy, it shows that calculated risk and long-term view right from day one, setting realistic expectations.
Okay, so launch date, July 16, 1995. Early sales show promise.
But they also faced a lot of skepticism and competition, right? Barnes & Noble started going online too.
Right, it wasn't an empty field. So how did they go from that garage fighting off competitors to, well, Amazon?
The IPO in '97 was huge, gave them the capital they needed to expand, and they moved fast into music, DVDs, electronics, other stuff. But a really pivotal moment, I think, was launching Amazon Marketplace in 2000.
Ah, yes, letting other people sell on their site. How did that change things?
Dramatically. I mean, the selection just exploded overnight without Amazon having to buy and manage all that inventory.
It shifted the whole model.
Yeah, they became a platform, not just a retailer.
Right.
And it's pretty remarkable they survived, even thrived, through the dot-com crash when so many others failed.
They definitely learned some hard lessons then, adapted.
For sure. Then, sort of mid-2000s, you get these two game changers, Amazon Prime and AWS.
Okay, let's take Prime first. Unlimited 2-day shipping. Seems normal now, but back then?
Oh, it was radical. A huge departure. That flat annual fee for fast shipping, it completely changed how people thought about buying online.
Built incredible loyalty.
Exactly. And encouraged people to buy more, obviously. Then it morphed into this huge bundle, video, music, ebooks, a whole ecosystem.
And what, 200 million members globally by 2023? Just massive.
Speaks for itself, really. A fundamental shift in consumer habits.
Okay, then AWS, Amazon Web Services, that started internally, didn't it? To handle their own massive computing needs.
That's right. It's a great example of that long-term vision again. They solved a huge internal problem, how to scale their infrastructure.
And then realized
That other businesses needed this too. They could sell this robust infrastructure as a service. AWS basically invented the cloud computing industry as we know it.
on-demand, scalable computing power.
And financially, it became Amazon's powerhouse, its most profitable division, funding a lot of their other bets and experiments.
It's just an incredible leap from selling books to leading the cloud.
Absolutely.
Trade in your boring job for a brilliant career using Adobe Creative Cloud. Start learning now with the free trial link in the description.
And somewhere in there, 2007, they launched the Kindle. Another huge disruption, this time to publishing.
Right. And then the acquisitions. You mentioned IMDb for media data.
Zappos for their legendary customer service. Kiva Systems for warehouse robots.
Each one seems to have a clear strategic fit.
Definitely. IMDb boosts media. Zappos teaches them customer service. Kiva revolutionizes their warehouses, speeding up Prime. Even buying Whole Foods, a major move into physical stores.
But not everything worked. The Fire Phone comes to mind.
Right, a famous flop. And Haven, the healthcare thing.
But the sources suggest these weren't seen just as failures inside Amazon.
More like part of the process, that culture of experimentation. You try things, some don't work, you learn, you move on. It's baked into the philosophy.
Which brings us to that philosophy, the Bezos doctrine, the leadership principles.
Yeah, it's this very distinct, very demanding set of ideas that really shaped the company culture. Hugely influential.
Let's dig into some key ones. Customer obsession seems central.
Absolutely. The empty chair in meetings representing the customer, that relentless focus.
Constantly innovating for the customer, even if they don't know they need it yet.
Exactly. Then long-term thinking. Making decisions based on years out, not just the next quarter. Operating at a loss for ages. Reinvesting heavily in things like AWS, Blue Origin.
That requires serious patience, especially for a public company.
Unusually patient, yeah. And the day one mentality.
Ah, yes. Always acting like a startup, avoiding stagnation, or day two.
Right, that sense of urgency, agility, resisting bureaucracy. The famous two pizza teams idea fits here too. Keep teams small and nimble so they can move fast.
What else? Bias for action.
Make decisions quickly, even with only, say, 70% of the information.
Yeah.
Especially if the decision is reversible. Keep things moving.
Speed matters.
Hugely. Then frugality, doing more with less. Those stories about the early cheap desks made out of doors.
Right. Very telling. Not wasting money.
And invent and simplify. Always looking for new ways, better ways, even if people don't get it at first.
Being willing to be misunderstood.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And finally, have backbone, disagree and commit.
Encourage debate, challenge ideas.
Respectfully, yeah. But once a decision is made, everyone gets behind it 100%. Fosters honesty, but leads to action.
And the 6-page memos instead of PowerPoints.
Forces deep thinking, clear writing, real understanding before a meeting even starts.
It paints a picture of a very deliberate, very demanding culture.
Correct.
Led to incredible success, obviously.
No question. But his ambitions didn't stop at Amazon, did they?
No. Blue Origin and the Washington Post are huge later chapters.
Blue Origin, founded way back in 2000, actually, but really ramping up later. That's the space dream from his high school speech finally taking shape.
Right. Pouring billions into it, the mission being
lowering the cost to get to space, eventually enabling humanity to expand beyond Earth, use space resources, big long-term goals.
And they've had some successes. The reusable New Shepard rocket.
First booster to land vertically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And his own flight. Plus the recent New Glenn orbital rocket launch. That was a big step.
Puts them seriously in the game for orbital launches.
Definitely reinforces that long-term space commitment. Then there's the Washington Post, bought in 2013.
Which seemed like a left turn for many people. E-commerce, space, now newspapers.
Yeah, it was surprising. But the sources frame it as a personal investment, trying to help a vital institution navigate the digital age.
Injecting capital, focusing on digital growth.
Investing in technology like their ArcXP platform, which they now license to other publishers, applying that same tech-driven, long-term thinking to news.
Though owning a major newspaper while running other huge businesses does raise questions, inevitably.
Sure, potential conflicts of interest are always discussed in those situations, but the stated focus was ensuring the Post's future.
Absolutely. It's always complex. Now, speaking of sources, we got that initial query from you about biographies, something about an author named Katie St. Ors.
Right. We looked into that thoroughly,
All right.
and basically, no. We couldn't find any major biography of Bezos by anyone with that name or anything close. There's a Kate Stone who wrote about the Civil War, a Kate Stone Lombardi who writes on other topics.
You're saying related to Bezos, no?
So it seems like the name might have just been misremembered slightly.
Because all our sources and pretty much everyone else points to one definitive book, right?
Exactly. Brad Stone's the everything store. He's a top tech journalist, had great access. It's widely considered the book on Amazon's rise and Bezos.
Okay, so that's the go-to for a deep dive. Good to clarify.
Definitely the authoritative one.
So moving to the current phase. He stepped down as Amazon CEO in July 2021. Andy Jassy took over. Bezos became executive chairman. What's his focus now?
Well, still deeply involved with Blue Origin and the Post, as we said, but also a really noticeable increase in his philanthropy.
Right, the Bezos Earth Fund and the Day One Fund. These are huge commitments.
$10 billion for the Earth Fund alone, focused on climate change, protecting nature, very science-driven, big scale.
And the Day One Fund.
That's split between fighting homelessness and funding Montessori-inspired preschools in underserved communities. It really feels like a shift towards legacy, tackling these massive global issues.
Beyond those big funds, he's also involved in other things. Bezos Expeditions, his investment firm.
Altos Labs, which is doing research into cellular rejuvenation, trying to reverse aging, and even supporting the Clock of the Long Now, that 10,000-year clock project.
It all reinforces that long-term focus, doesn't it? Even the philanthropy seems geared towards systemic long-term change.
Absolutely. And he made that statement in 2022 about planning to give away the majority of his fortune during his lifetime. That's potentially transformative.
A huge development if it plays out. It really signals an evolution moving beyond just building the empire.
Yeah, towards addressing these broader societal, even existential challenges.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Our deep dive into Jeff Bezos. We've covered the early influences, that calculated bet on the internet.
The incredible growth of Amazon, driven by relentless innovation and that unique leadership style.
And now his focus shifting towards space, media, and these major philanthropic efforts.
From taking apart a crib to aiming for the stars, literally, and it's quite a story.
And for you, listening, seeking that quick but thorough understanding, we hope this has pieced together the puzzle of this really complex and influential figure.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.
Okay, great. That's a wrap. I'm Katie St. Ors, and let me send out a huge thank you for listening. If you want more content on personal finance and small business, head over and find me on YouTube. You can also find me on Spotify, Amazon Music, TikTok, and Apple iTunes. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next Deep Dive podcast.